Okay, welcome back, kiddos. Now we are going to move on to our next section, next notes in Unit 5. So this is going to be 5.2. We're going to talk about congruent triangles. Okay, so congruent. Okay, so what does congruent mean? Okay, congruent, remember, means same shape and same size. Okay, so we don't change anything when it is congruent. All we do is we just move it around. We might flip it around like this or reflect it like we talked about. So congruent are rigid transformations. Okay, so remember the rigid transformations are reflections, translations, rotations, um, reflections, rotations, and translations. Okay, so those are going to be the rigid. Okay, rigid means that it's the same size and same shape. Okay, all we do is either flip it over, move it, or turn it. Okay, so congruent triangles is similar to anything that is a congruent polygons. So if we're told that there's a good congruent polygons, that means that corresponding angles are going to be congruent. Okay, and also corresponding sides are going to be congruent. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Corresponding angles are going to be congruent, and also corresponding sides are congruent. So, what we're going to do is also we're going to highlight at the end the major things. All right, so far congruent is a major thing we need to recognize. So, we want to first, it says identify all pairs of corresponding parts. Okay, so we're told that ABCD is congruent with EFGH. Okay, so one thing we want to recognize is that on the angles, these arcs right here signify the angle measures. Okay, so when we're going to use angles, we're going to use arcs. Okay, so we're going to use something like that. Okay, when we're doing angles. Okay, so then when we're doing sides, we're going to use something similar. We're going to use tick marks. Tick marks, right? So we're going to use something like that or something like that. Okay, so that signifies that the sides are congruent, and then these are the angles are congruent. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so we see this is C, right? So let's go ahead and write down these four angles first. So angle, we're going to say angle A, angle B, angle B, angle C, and angle D. All right, so we're going to say which one corresponds with which. All right, well, first off, we see this is A, right, has 1, 2, 3. So which one has three of them? Three of them is E, so that one corresponds this means congruent, right, congruent with angle E. Okay, so pause the video, see if you can get the other ones. All right, angle B. Okay, angle B, we see it right over here. Come on, stop it. Angle B, we see right over here, has 2, right? So which one has 2? That's going to be angle F. All right, what about angle C? You're getting the hang of this. Angle C has 1, right? So the other one with 1 is angle G. Okay, and then angle D, right? So angle D has 4 arcs, right? So 4 arcs would be angle H. Okay, so what that means with corresponding is, if you think about it, to go from here to here, what we did is we just turn this, right? We rotated it around. So this one, this C, instead of being on the bottom, then rotated up to the top. Okay, so now let's talk about the corresponding sides. Now this one's a little bit trickier, but this is how we do it, right? Let's start with the first one. Let's just say this one right here. Let's just start with a 1 tick mark on that. So which one is the same as that? Well, if we think about it, we move that around, it's going to be right over here, right? But we can also tell, because this is 1 hash arc, this is 2 arcs. So between the 1 and the 2 is that. That's another way we can confirm, right? So we're going to say side, this side, which is BC, is congruent with side FG. Right? Okay, so then let's do this one. Let's just put 2 right there. Okay, so which one does that correspond to, right? Remember, if we rotate it around, it would be this one. But also, we see 2 arcs here. We got 3 arcs, 2 arcs, and 3 arcs. So this tells me that that one is 2, right? So we're going to say this is AB corresponds with which one? We said that one is EF, right? Okay, next, let's do this one right here. Let's put 3 on that one, okay? So this one is, we would think, we keep rotating around. We go 1, 2, then 3. So we're going to go 1, 2, then 3, right? We know that. Another way we can see is this has 3, this has 4, this has 3, and this has 4. So the third 3 hashes is in between. So AD corresponds and is congruent with EH. So AD in EH, right? And we know they're corresponding because of this. We know they're congruent because this tells us it's congruent, right? This right here. Okay, next. Well, we know this one's the last one. That's 4. We can put 4 on that. But we also know this is between 1 and 4 arcs. This is between the 1 arc and the 4 arcs. So we're going to say this is CD, and we're going to call that GH. So CD is congruent with GH. Okay, so that's how we tell that they're we can identify. So that's how we identify those, is with the arcs, right, for the angles, and then the tick marks for the sides. Okay, now keeping that in mind, let's go next level. Okay, it says given that this triangle XYZ, so that's this one, is congruent with RST. Okay, so we need to find the value of X and Y. Right? They want to find the value of X and Y. Well, what do we know? If they're congruent, that means the angles are equal and the side lengths are equal. Okay, so the angles equal the angles, right? And the sides equal the sides. So let's first mark those, right? Let's look over here. This angle right here, that's 30. If we see these two sides that are congruent. If this is pointing up, that means it's right over here, right? So that's 30, right? Well, same thing over here. If this is pointing up and that's there and there, this one, S is the same as Y. Another way we can tell is look at the letters, right? This is the middle letter, this is the middle letter. If these are congruent, they also have to be in the same congruent order. All right, so that's what we know. Well, let's see here. What does that tell us? That tells us that 2x minus 20, this measurement is equal to this one, which is 30, right? So that's how we can figure out that x. So we're going to say 2x minus 20 equals 30. All right, so then we're just going to add 20. Once we set it up with a correct statement, then we can just easily do our algebra, right? Those 20s cancel out. 2x equals 50, right? We're going to divide by 2, so x equals 25. Okay? Now, similarly, let's think about the y. Y is talking about this side, right? It's a side length, right? Because we see this. Okay? Now, if that's a side length and this is pointing up in between that, that means this is equal to this, right? But that doesn't have a label. But we know if this is 15, then this also has to be how much? 15, right? So if that's 15, that means this has to be equal to 15. So let's do it. We're going to say 3y plus 9 equals 15, right? We said that equals that. So now let's do it. Once we set it up, that's it. Simple as that, right? Minus 9, so 3y equals 6. Divide by 3 all day, y equals 2, right? Okay, so that's all we have to do is just start out with a true statement and then just do our math, right? So now hopefully we're recognizing even more. The hardest thing is just setting it up correctly. Okay, so first step is just identify corresponding parts. Right, so we identify those corresponding parts of the congruent triangles. Okay, so that's what we do first. All right, so now this was if we told you that these two are congruent. All right, if we tell you they're congruent, then we can use these statements, right? But what if we want to know if they're congruent? Okay, so here's the steps to determining if two triangles are congruent. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I got these steps right here. We'll make it real easy. First thing, we're going to label the congruent sides with an S, and Okay, we're going to label congruent angles with an A. Okay, congruent sides with an S and congruent angles with an A. All right, so let's look over here. All right, so we're going to say that this side, right, is congruent with this side, right? So we're going to say that's side and this side, right? Then congruent angles with an A. So this one is congruent with this one right here, right? So we're going to say that's A and A, right? And then this angle has two arcs, right? And this has two arcs, so those are also congruent. Okay, so I did my first step. I labeled the A's with an A that are congruent, right? And there's the key, the congruent ones, right? And then the congruent angles and congruent sides. All right, next, circle the letter that's furthest away from the other letters. Okay, so let's look over here. We got an A, and an S, right? Which one's farthest away? Okay, A is in the middle, right? So the farthest away is either going to be this one or this one. It actually does not matter, okay? So we're just going to circle this one right over here, okay? Then connect it to the closest letter. You cannot cut through the triangle, okay? So I need to connect it to the closest one. So S, I'd have to go through the triangle. This one is the next closest, right? S is closer to A than this S is, right? So I'm going to connect it to this, okay? Then connect it to the final letter, okay? So now I'm going to connect A to that, okay? Determine if it's one of the 5 congruence theorems below. So this one is A, S, right? So this one is A, S, right? And I could have done it on this one too. It didn't matter if I did this one or this one, right? So this one, I would have circled the farthest one, which is A. Then I would have said A, and then S, right? Okay, now, if, when we do this pattern, if it matches up with any of these, it is congruent. Okay, if it matches with one of these, it's not. So, if our order was SSS, that stands for side, 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 then it is congruent. Okay, if it's SAS, which is side, angle, side, then it's congruent. Okay, this one, if it's angle, side, angle, it's congruent. Okay, this one, if it's angle, angle, side, then it is congruent. Okay, and then this last one, those are different letters, right? But this one stands for, this is a little trickier, this is for hypotenuse, hypotenuse leg, for HL, hypotenuse leg. Okay, so if we come up with any of these, okay, and it can be backwards, right? This one backwards is still SSS. This is still SAS if we go read it backwards, right? This one is ASA. This one backwards would be SAA. So if it's SAA, that's cool also. Okay, if it's any of these, it is not congruent. So if it's AAA, so angle, 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 that's not enough. Not enough info to tell us that these are congruent. Or if it's SSA, which is side, side, angle. Okay? So, and this one backwards is a bad word, so no bad words either. Okay, so any of these two, it's not. If it's any of these combinations, it is. Okay, so we're just going to label the sides and label the angles. Right? Then we're going to go from the farthest one and connect it, and then read it out which one it is. Okay, so keep